US President Trump gets ready to give a major national security address on US deployment in Afghanistan. We're due to take that speech live in just a few minutes' time. Hello and welcome to this special edition on France 24 as we wait for the US President Donald Trump to begin his first major national security address at Fort Myer in Arlington, Virginia. He's set to outline his strategy for US military involvement in Afghanistan, which has been going on for 16 years. Trump held off on this for months, caught between his campaign promise to pull troops out of Afghanistan and his other vow to start winning wars. I'm now joined live on the line from Washington by our correspondent Philip Crowther. Philip, what do we know about what Trump's likely to say?
Quite a bit's now filtering through about what this announcement will truly be about. According to the White House, it's about the way forward in Afghanistan and South Asia. But what you'll remember from this is what kind of a troop increase in Afghanistan U.S. President Donald Trump will announce. The most likely outcome will be an increase of 4,000 U.S. troops, as recommended to the U.S. President by his Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and by the generals who are part of his inner team at the White House. Now, that is a pretty big increase of troop numbers. Right now, it stands at 8,400 U.S. soldiers who are stationed in Afghanistan. And again, according to the White House, this is a little bit larger, this speech. It will be not only about Afghanistan, but South Asia as well. So expect some mentions of Pakistan as well, and of how this U.S. president, how Donald Trump wants Pakistan to get more involved in the fight against terror groups like Al-Qaeda, like the Taliban. We can see him walking in right
Philip,
now.
sorry to interrupt you there. We're going to now stand by and cross live to Donald Trump.
Vice President Pence, Secretary of State Tillerson, members of the Cabinet, General Dunford, Deputy Secretary Shanahan, and Colonel Duggan. Most especially, thank you to the men and women of Fort Myer and every member of the United States military at home and abroad. We send our thoughts and prayers to the families of our brave sailors who were injured and lost after a tragic collision at sea, as well as to those conducting the search and recovery efforts. I am here tonight to lay out our path forward in Afghanistan and South Asia. But before I provide the details of our new strategy, I want to say a few words to the service members here with us tonight, to those watching from their posts, and to all Americans listening at home. Since the founding of our republic, our country has produced a special class of heroes whose selflessness, courage, and resolve is unmatched in human history. American patriots from every generation have given their last breath on the battlefield for our nation and for our freedom. Through their lives, and though their lives were cut short, in their deeds, they achieved total immortality. By following the heroic example of those who fought to preserve our republic, we can find the inspiration our country needs to unify, to heal, and to remain one nation under God. The men and women of our military operate as one team, with one shared mission and one shared sense of purpose. They transcend every line of race, ethnicity, creed, and color to serve together and sacrifice together in absolutely perfect cohesion. That is because all service members are brothers and sisters. They're all part of the same family. It's called the American family. They take the same oath, fight for the same flag, and live according to the same law. They are bound together by common purpose, mutual trust, and selfless devotion to our nation and to each other. The soldier understands what we as a nation too often forget, that a wound inflicted upon a single member of our community is a wound inflicted upon us all. When one part of America hurts, we all hurt. And when one citizen suffers an injustice, we all suffer together. Loyalty to our nation demands loyalty to one another. Love for America requires love for all of its people. When we open our hearts to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice, no place for bigotry, and no tolerance for hate. The young men and women we send to fight our wars abroad deserve to return to a country that is not at war with itself at home. We cannot remain a force for peace in the world if we are not at peace with each other. As we send our bravest to defeat our enemies overseas, and we will always win, let us find the courage to heal our divisions within. Let us make a simple promise to the men and women we ask to fight in our name, that when they return home from battle, they will find a country that has renewed the sacred bonds of love and loyalty that unite us together as one. Thanks to the vigilance and skill of the American military and of our many allies throughout the world, horrors on the scale of September 11th, and nobody can ever forget that, have not been repeated on our shores. But we must acknowledge the reality I am here to talk about tonight, that nearly 16 years after September 11th attacks, after the extraordinary sacrifice of blood and treasure, the American people are weary of war without victory. Nowhere is this more evident than with the war in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history, 17 years. I share the American people's frustration. I also share their frustration over a foreign policy that has spent too much time, energy, money, and most importantly, lives, trying to rebuild countries in our own image instead of pursuing our security interests above all other considerations. That is why, shortly after my inauguration, I directed Secretary of Defense Mattis and my national security team to undertake a comprehensive review of all strategic options in Afghanistan and South Asia. My original instinct was to pull out, and historically, I like following my instincts. But all my life, I've heard that decisions are much different when you sit behind the desk in the Oval Office. In other words, when you're President of the United States. So I studied Afghanistan in great detail and from every conceivable angle. After many meetings over many months, we held our final meeting last Friday at Camp David with my cabinet and generals to complete our strategy. I arrived at three fundamental conclusions about America's core interests in Afghanistan. First, our nation must seek an honorable and enduring outcome worthy of the tremendous sacrifices that have been made, especially the sacrifices of lives. The men and women who serve our nation in combat deserve a plan for victory. They deserve the tools they need and the trust they have earned to fight and to win. Second, the consequences of a rapid exit are both predictable and unacceptable. 9/11, the worst terrorist attack in our history, was planned and directed from Afghanistan because that country was ruled by a government that gave comfort and shelter to terrorists. A hasty withdrawal would create a vacuum that terrorists, including ISIS and Al-Qaeda, would instantly fill, just as happened before September 11th. And as we know, in 2011, America hastily and mistakenly withdrew from Iraq. As a result, our hard-won gains slipped back into the hands of terrorist enemies. Our soldiers watched as cities they had fought for and bled to liberate, and won, were occupied by a terrorist group called ISIS. The vacuum we created by leaving too soon gave safe haven for ISIS to spread, to grow, recruit, and launch attacks. We cannot repeat in Afghanistan the mistake our leaders made in Iraq. Third and finally, I concluded that the security threats we face in Afghanistan and the broader region are immense. Today, 20 U.S. designated foreign terrorist organizations are active in Afghanistan and Pakistan, the highest concentration in any region, anywhere in the world. For its part, Pakistan often gives safe haven to agents of chaos, violence, and terror. The threat is worse because Pakistan and India are two nuclear-armed states whose tense relations threaten to spiral into conflict, and that could happen. No one denies that we have inherited a challenging and troubling situation in Afghanistan and South Asia, but we do not have the luxury of going back in time and making different or better decisions. When I became president, I was given a bad and very complex hand, but I fully knew what I was getting into, big and intricate problems. But one way or another, these problems will be solved. I'm a problem solver. And in the end, we will win. We must address the reality of the world as it exists right now, the threats we face, and the confronting of all of the problems of today, and extremely predictable consequences of a hasty withdrawal. We need look no further than last week's vile, vicious attack in Barcelona to understand that terror groups will stop at nothing to commit the mass murder of innocent men, women, and children. You saw it for yourself. Horrible. As I outlined in my speech in Saudi Arabia 3 months ago, America and our partners are committed to stripping terrorists of their territory, cutting off their funding, and exposing the false allure of their evil ideology. Terrorists who slaughter innocent people will find no glory in this life or the next. They are nothing but thugs and criminals and predators and, that's right, losers. Working alongside our allies, we will break their will, dry up their recruitment, keep them from crossing our borders, and yes, we will defeat them, and we will defeat them handily. In Afghanistan and Pakistan, America's interests are clear. We must stop the resurgence of safe havens that enable terrorists to threaten America. And we must prevent nuclear weapons and materials from coming into the hands of terrorists and being used against us or anywhere in the world, for that matter. But to prosecute this war, we will learn from history. As a result of our comprehensive review, American strategy in Afghanistan and South Asia will change dramatically in the following ways. A core pillar of our new strategy is a shift from a time-based approach to one based on conditions. I've said it many times, how counterproductive it is for the United States to announce in advance the dates we intend to begin or end military options. We will not talk about numbers of troops or our plans for further military activities. Conditions on the ground, not arbitrary timetables, will guide our strategy from now on. America's enemies must never know our plans or believe they can wait us out. I will not say when we are going to attack, but attack we will. Another fundamental pillar of our new strategy is the integration of all instruments of American power, diplomatic, economic, and military, toward a successful outcome. Someday, after an effective military effort, perhaps it will be possible to have a political settlement that includes elements of the Taliban in Afghanistan. But nobody knows if or when that will ever happen. America will continue its support for the Afghan government and the Afghan military as they confront the Taliban in the field. Ultimately, it is up to the people of Afghanistan to take ownership of their future, to govern their society, and to achieve an everlasting peace. We are a partner and a friend, but we will not dictate to the Afghan people how to live or how to govern their own complex society. We are not nation building again. We are killing terrorists. The next pillar of our new strategy is to change the approach and how to deal with Pakistan. We can no longer be silent about Pakistan's safe havens for terrorist organizations, the Taliban, and other groups that pose a threat to the region and beyond. Pakistan has much to gain from partnering with our effort in Afghanistan. It has much to lose by continuing to harbor criminals and terrorists. In the past, Pakistan has been a valued partner. Our militaries have worked together against common enemies. The Pakistani people have suffered greatly from terrorism and extremism. We recognize those contributions and those sacrifices. But Pakistan has also sheltered the same organizations that try every single day to kill our people. We have been paying Pakistan billions and billions of dollars. At the same time, they are housing the very terrorists that we are fighting. But that will have to change, and that will change immediately. No partnership can survive a country's harboring of militants and terrorists who target U.S. service members and officials. It is time for Pakistan to demonstrate its commitment to civilization, order, and to peace. Another critical part of the South Asia strategy for America is to further develop its strategic partnership with India, the world's largest democracy and a key security and economic partner of the United States. We appreciate India's important contributions to stability in Afghanistan. But India makes billions of dollars in trade with the United States, and we want them to help us more with Afghanistan, especially in the area of economic assistance and development. We are committed to pursuing our shared objectives for peace and security in South Asia and the broader Indo-Pacific region. Finally, my administration will ensure that you, the brave defenders of the American people, will have the necessary tools and rules of engagement to make this strategy work and work effectively and work quickly. I have already lifted restrictions the previous administration placed on our warfighters that prevented the Secretary of Defense and our commanders in the field from fully and swiftly waging battle against the enemy. Micromanagement from Washington, D.C. does not win battles. They are one in the field, drawing upon the judgment and expertise of wartime commanders and frontline soldiers, acting in real time with real authority and with a clear mission to defeat the enemy. That's why we will also expand authority for American armed forces to target the terrorist and criminal networks that sow violence and chaos throughout Afghanistan. These killers need to know they have nowhere to hide, that no place is beyond the reach of American might and American arms. Retribution will be fast and powerful as we lift restrictions and expand authorities in the field. We are already seeing dramatic results in the campaign to defeat ISIS, including the liberation of Mosul in Iraq. Since my inauguration, we have achieved record-breaking success in that regard. We will also maximize sanctions and other financial and law enforcement actions against these networks to eliminate their ability to export terror. When America commits its warriors to battle, we must ensure they have every weapon to apply swift, decisive, and overwhelming force. Our troops will fight to win. We will fight to win. From now on, victory will have a clear definition: attacking our enemies, obliterating ISIS, crushing al-Qaeda, preventing the Taliban from taking over Afghanistan, and stopping mass terror attacks against America before they emerge. We will ask our NATO allies and global partners to support our new strategy with additional troop and funding increases in line with our own. We are confident they will. Since taking office, I have made clear that our allies and partners must contribute much more money to our collective defense, and they have done so. In this struggle, the heaviest burden will continue to be borne by the good people of Afghanistan and their courageous armed forces. As the Prime Minister of Afghanistan has promised, we are going to participate in economic development to help defray the cost of this war to us. Afghanistan is fighting to defend and secure their country against the same enemies who threaten us. The stronger the Afghan security forces become, the less we will have to do. Afghans will secure and build their own nation and define their own future. We want them to succeed, but we will no longer use American military might to construct democracies in faraway lands or try to rebuild other countries in our own image. Those days are now over. Instead, we will work with allies and partners to protect our shared interests. We are not asking others to change their way of life, but to pursue common goals that allow our children to live better and safer lives. This principled realism will guide our decisions moving forward. Military power alone will not bring peace to Afghanistan or stop the terrorist threat arising in that country. But strategically applied force aims to create the conditions for a political process to achieve a lasting peace. America will work with the Afghan government as long as we see determination and progress. However, our commitment is not unlimited, and our support is not a blank check. The government of Afghanistan must carry their share of the military, political, and economic burden. The American people expect to see real reforms, real progress, and real results. Our patience is not unlimited. We will keep our eyes wide open. In abiding by the oath I took on January 20th, I will remain steadfast in protecting American lives and American interests. In this effort, we will make common cause with any nation that chooses to stand and fight alongside us against this global threat. Terrorists, take heed. America will never let up until you are dealt a lasting defeat. Under my administration, many billions of dollars more is being spent on our military. And this includes vast amounts being spent on our nuclear arsenal and missile defense. In every generation, we have faced down evil, and we have always prevailed. We prevailed because we know who we are and what we are fighting for. Not far from where we are gathered tonight, hundreds of thousands of America's greatest patriots lay in eternal rest at Arlington National Cemetery. There is more courage, sacrifice, and love in those hallowed grounds than in any other spot on the face of the earth. Many of those who have fought and died in Afghanistan enlisted in the months after September 11th, 2001. They volunteered for a simple reason. They loved America, and they were determined to protect her. Now we must secure the cause for which they gave their lives. We must unite to defend America from its enemies abroad. We must restore the bonds of loyalty among our citizens at home, and we must achieve an honorable and enduring outcome worthy of the enormous price that so many have paid. Our actions, and in months to come, all of them, will honor the sacrifice of every fallen hero, every family who lost a loved one, and every wounded warrior who shed their blood in defense of our great nation. With our resolve, we will ensure that your service and that your families will bring about the defeat of our enemies and the arrival of peace. We will push onward to victory with power in our hearts, courage in our souls, and everlasting pride in each and every one of you. Thank you. May God bless our military, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And that was U.S. President Donald Trump speaking live from Fort Myer in Arlington, Virginia. U.S. President Trump lays out his new strategy for Afghanistan, announcing an end to time-based strategies and promising to boost troops and funding. And I'm joined on the line by our Washington correspondent, Philip Crowther. Philip, is this more or less what was expected?
Well, we were expecting potentially an actual announcement of troop numbers for Afghanistan. That did not happen. The U.S. President Donald Trump clearly saying that he does not want to give the number of troops that he might send at any moment or another to Afghanistan. There had been a lot of reporting about there potentially being 4,000 further U.S. troops sent to the country, with 8,400 already in place there. But there was none of that from the U.S. president in this address. More than anything, it was, first of all, a description of how his point of view on Afghanistan has changed, because before he became president, he was for a hasty withdrawal of all American troops from Afghanistan. He said that after thinking about it, after becoming president and noticing how things, well, really work, basically, he decided that that was not the right decision, that he was going to keep U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and we are expecting more American troops to be sent there. He also says that this is not about nation building for the United States, it's about killing terrorists. That's a direct quote from the U.S. president, and one of the most important quotes from him in this address to U.S. troops in a military base just outside of Washington. He says that these are the objectives for the United States from now on. Attacking our enemies, he says, obliterating ISIS, the Islamic State group, that is, crushing al-Qaeda, preventing the Taliban from taking over the country, and stopping mass terror attacks against Americans before they emerge. That, in a nutshell, would be the tactic as announced by U.S. President Donald Trump. That, of course, not being all that different necessarily from past strategies of other U.S. presidents, largely, of course, U.S. President Obama. This is a very, very long war indeed. 16 years now for the United States, its longest war of all time. Interestingly enough, from the U.S. president, no end date announced as to when he would like all U.S. troops to depart Afghanistan. That is something he did not want to announce at this speech.
And why might Trump have left out that figure, that 4,000?
Well, he says that is part of what his administration will be doing from now on. And he actually said this on the campaign trail several times as well, that he would not want to talk about military tactics before they actually happen. And he says now that troop numbers will be part of that. Now, that is very interesting because one tends to know how many U.S. troops are abroad in most countries. That is something that the public really should know, and we will probably know this eventually, how many people really will be sent. But he didn't want to use this announcement to do so. Maybe he is trying to be different to what his predecessor had done in the past. He made quite a few speeches on Afghanistan, very often giving clear end dates as to when he wanted troops to go away, when he would have a surge of U.S. troops to Afghanistan. That is something that Donald Trump does not want to do. It is a very big difference compared to his predecessor. But again, I do think that we will find out how many troops will be sent because the Pentagon simply will have to make that public knowledge.
Okay, and obviously a key part of this is secrecy, but in concrete terms, what could this translate to on the ground?
Well, if more troops are sent to Afghanistan, and if indeed there will be up to 4,000, because there's a reason why we talk about 4,000 U.S. troops. That's the number that the U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis once sent to Afghanistan, and that is also the number, the smallest amount that many of the generals that now surround the U.S. president in his inner circle would like to be sent to Afghanistan. So that is a concrete number. We'll have to wait and see whether that at any point becomes official. Now, what they would do is they would be working in counterterrorism operations against specific terrorist organizations, maybe specifically against the Taliban as well, but most notably against an Islamic State offshoot and Al-Qaeda. Both groups are a worry to this administration, especially the Islamic State getting a foothold in Afghanistan right now. So counterterrorism operations would be one of the reasons why more troops would be sent to Afghanistan. And then what they've been doing for a very, very long time now, training, assisting, and advising the Afghan security forces. That is something that U.S. troops have been doing in Afghanistan for a very long time now, and that is an operation that is very much still ongoing.
And just how far can Trump go in terms of this secrecy on the battlefield?
It's a good question. I believe the Pentagon would have to, at some point, clearly state how many troops are being sent. This is something that tends to be made public, how many American soldiers are in any country. Now, if they are members of the CIA or any other security agencies or intelligence agencies, that is not necessarily in the public domain. But these are soldiers who would know they were going, and then the public would also eventually find out. But there is an element of secrecy to this, and that is very much a promise that Donald Trump wants to keep from the campaign trail, which is he does not want to announce military tactics or plans to the public or to the media before it actually happens. And that was partly what this speech was about. It was saying, I'm not going to do what my predecessor did, which was go on television, go and make these addresses to the nation, as Donald Trump made one here tonight, and make clear what tactics will be used.
Okay, and how would this fit in with contributions from NATO and international partners?
No mention of that from Donald Trump, interestingly enough. NATO troops are, of course, on the ground and are a part of this operation. There was no important element in this speech and this address to the nation that included any mention of NATO troops. And remember that this is a president who wants to put America first, as he puts it, and might make America go it alone at some point. There was also no mention from him of any kind of discussions that there might have been with NATO member countries about how many troops they might be contributing to this. That's an open question.
Okay, and he's pointing the finger at Pakistan.
Yes, absolutely. He believes that Pakistan is not doing enough in the fight against terrorist groups. He believes that Pakistan is providing a safe haven to terrorist groups at this point, and that is why this speech was announced as a speech on Afghanistan and South Asia. And with South Asia, he means Pakistan more than anything. He believes that that country won't be getting the support that it has been getting in the past from the U.S. government. But he also said that the help from the U.S. government to Afghanistan and other countries is conditional. So that might be a departure as well there. But what he wants is for the country of Pakistan to do more in the fight against terrorist groups that might be finding a safe haven there. This was a very important part of his speech. And maybe one more important element to quickly discuss that doesn't necessarily have all that much to do with Pakistan, but there was a very interesting part here from President Donald Trump when he said that he believes that the Taliban might be involved in some way or another in a peace agreement once things settle down, so to say. Now, that is new. That's very interesting, that Donald Trump might be willing for the United States to get into discussions, negotiations potentially as well with the Taliban. That was something that was very notable from the speech.
Okay, thank you very much, Philip Crowther, for that analysis live from Washington. And now moving on to other world news. Spanish police say the man they shot dead just outside the city this Monday is the suspect they've been searching for. They confirmed that 22-year-old Younes Abouyacoub was responsible for last Thursday's van attack on the La Rambla promenade. The victim death toll from that day has risen to 15. Emerald Maxwell has more.
He was the last accomplice still at large, a member of the cell accused of being behind the attacks in Barcelona and Cambrils. Now police have shot dead Younes Abouyacoub in the area of Subirats, following a 5-day manhunt. He was wearing what appeared to be an explosives belt. The rural area is just 40 kilometers from where he allegedly ploughed a van down Las Ramblas, killing and wounding pedestrians.
Just before 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the Catalan police has shot dead Younes Abouyacoub, driver of the van and direct perpetrator of the attack in Barcelona on Thursday.
Police say the death toll from the attacks that day has risen to include a man whose body was found in an abandoned car. Abouyacoub allegedly stabbed him when he hijacked the vehicle to flee the city. Police also confirmed that the imam who is believed to have radicalized the rest of the terror cell was also killed in an accidental explosion at a house in Alcanar, south of Barcelona, that was being used as a bomb factory.
The remains indicate there were 2 people, and based on the witnesses' accounts and some seized documents, the evidence points to the imam as the person present that night at the Alcanar address.
Of the 12 known accomplices, 8 are now dead. 4 are being held and will go in front of the High Court in Madrid.
The US Embassy in Russia has said it will temporarily suspend issuing non-immigrant visas until the end of the month. The decision comes after Moscow ordered a cap on the number of American diplomatic staff in Russia. Sharon Gaffney has more.
Visiting the United States from the world's largest country is about to become more complicated for many of its citizens. Russians wishing to secure non-immigrant visas for the US will no longer be able to apply through American consulates outside Moscow. They'll have to travel to the Russian capital instead. It comes less than a month after Moscow ordered Washington to more than halve its embassy and consular staff in retaliation for the latest round of US sanctions. The Russian foreign minister has accused the United States of attempting to stir up ill feeling.
My first impression is that this decision is another attempt to provoke discontent among Russian citizens over the actions of the Russian government. We will not be taking out our anger on American citizens.
The move could affect hundreds of thousands of Russian tourists.
We are very disappointed because we are going to visit relatives in the US. That was our plan.
We'd already bought tickets, so we're going to lose money. Of course, it's unpleasant for us as ordinary tourists. We've got nothing to do with the political disagreements between nations.
Accusations of Russian meddling in last year's US presidential election have led to already frosty relations between the two countries deteriorating further. In a move that's being seen as provocative, Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced the appointment of a new ambassador to the US, his combative Deputy Foreign Minister Anatoly Antonov.
Hundreds of people have been evacuated in southern Russia after a huge fire broke out in the city of Rostov-on-Don. Both residents and the fire brigade worked for hours to control a blaze that burned dozens of houses and left scores of people injured. Alexander Orkot reports.
Firefighting helicopters working desperately to control the massive inferno at the heart of Rostov-on-Don. Fanned by strong winds, the fire quickly enveloped a residential neighbourhood in the southern Russian city that sits close to the border with Ukraine. Before fire teams arrived, residents had rushed to try to contain it themselves. Dozens were injured and around 30 homes were burnt to cinders.
We're pouring water on it. This is terrible. So many people will be left homeless.
The fire erupted at an abandoned wooden house in the city centre. Russian media reported allegations from residents that arsonists had started it to help real estate developers get their hands on a prized plot of land. The regional governor and local prosecutors have promised to investigate the claims.
And now to Nigeria, where President Muhammadu Buhari has addressed the nation 2 days after returning to the country. This following 3 months receiving medical treatment in the UK. Many Nigerians had been hoping for information on his health, with some saying his mysterious illness deems him unfit to run the country. Buhari said he was distressed by calls for the dissolution of Nigeria, urging for unity. Let's take a listen.
I'm pleased to be back on home soil and not negotiable. We shall not allow irresponsible elements to start trouble, and when things get bad, they run away and settle others with the responsibility of bringing back order, if necessary, with their blood.
And finally, this Monday, millions of Americans have put on special protective glasses to watch the moon blot out the sun as a total solar eclipse swept across 14 states from west to east coast for the first time in almost a century, beginning its path in Oregon, where crowds flocked, hoping to catch the first glimpse. Sharon Gaffney has more.
It's been just under 100 years since the last time a total solar eclipse swept coast to coast across the US. Millions of skywatchers and amateur astronomers flocked to viewing points to watch the moon's shadow pass directly in front of the sun, blotting out its light.
I've wanted to see one of these my whole life, since I've been studying astronomy since I was a kid, and I thought I was prepared for it. I totally wasn't. I was shaking, I was crying, I was just totally taken aback by just how beautiful it was.
I still have goosebumps that are completely over my body because that's what it was. Yeah. You think you know something, you think you're prepared for it, but you have absolutely no idea.
The eclipse could be seen in 14 states, beginning in the west coast at Oregon and ending 90 minutes later over South Carolina.
The shadow path across the Earth is usually in the water, like across the ocean, or it's in hard to get places. This path actually goes across all the United States. It starts in Oregon and goes across, and so it's called the Great American Eclipse because so many Americans can see it and witness totality.
The next time such an event occurs in the US won't be until 2045.
And that's all we have time for. Stay tuned for more news coming up here on France 24.